Good morning, everybody. Welcome. As you're jumping in here, go ahead and drop in the chat where you're joining us from. It might be set to hosts and panelists on your screen. So if you want to chat with everybody, just make sure to toggle those settings to everyone. But yeah, let us know where you're joining us from. Seattle. Hello.
Oh, wow.
Welcome. A lot of people joining here. I'm going to get my screen here. Get that shared so everyone can make sure they're in the right place.
Ooh,
Welcome.
snowy St. Louis. It is snowy and cold here too in Omaha. -2.
I am. It's -2 there?
Last I checked.
Cold. I'm in Salt Lake City, not Nebraska. I almost said Salt Lake City, Nebraska. I spend some part of my time in Nebraska. Salt Lake City, Utah. It's cold here, but it looks like it's going to be a sunny day. It's not snowing.
Yeah, yeah.
Sophia, you're in
That's fun.
Utah too.
Oh, cool. Ooh,
Scotland. Welcome. So
negative
cool.
13 in Toronto. Oh my goodness. What do you even wear? How do you? I feel like my eyebrows would freeze.
I wouldn't leave my house. That's what I would just not do. Oh, it's so great to see everybody from really all over. Incredible. Quick screen check here. Devin, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. We'll give everybody just a few more minutes here to join, but let's go ahead and do some like introductions and also just a few housekeeping things. If you are here, you're here for the Internal Communications Benchmarks and Best Practices webinar. We are so excited to dive into this today. This has been a highly requested resource, and we're so excited that it is live, it's out there. Hopefully everybody got the report yesterday that we sent out and you were able to dig into some of that data that we'll go through today. But my name is Kelsey Kingdon. I am the marketing and events manager here at Workshop. I am joined by the lovely and so talented Devin Owens. She is our communications manager here at Workshop, and I'm pretty sure there's just nothing that she can't do. She's incredible. Really excited to dive into this with everybody today. Again, we're going to do a couple housekeeping things before we dive into the actual content. But first of all, we just want to say we're so glad you're here. We know everybody here is incredibly busy. You all have deadlines to meet, emails to send, you've got meetings today, really just a bunch of things to do. So we're really grateful that you are taking the hour to spend with us today. And it's going to be a really great event here. So thank you so much for joining us. This benchmarks report has been one of our most requested resources, and we're just really excited to peel back some of those layers and dig into the data. There were over 1,000 registrations for this event today, so you all are in very good company. One thing we want to mention is think of this event today like a networking event with hundreds of your peers. One thing that we really encourage here at our workshop events are to engage and network in the chat. I know there are some folks that have connected through our chat on some of our past webinars, and they actually have stayed in contact and have communicated and set up like recurring meetings. So very cool. Again, I mentioned this at the beginning, but if you do want to chat with everybody and kind of network with everyone, make sure to change your settings from hosts and panelists to everyone. Also, we really want to make this a live discussion. So as we're going through the content today, if things resonate with you or we're on certain topics or data pieces and you have questions or things that have worked well for you in your company, definitely let us know in the chat. We'll be sure to bubble up any questions or discussions that are relevant to the sections that we're talking about. And lastly, before we're done, we will send out the recording, the content, really everything we've covered today. So you won't really need to worry about taking notes. You can be fully present in today's event because we will send everything afterwards in a follow-up email. Devin, am I forgetting anything?
Nope, this is great.
Awesome. Should we dive in then? Cool. Before we dive into the actual report, I want to touch a little bit on how we think about benchmarks, right? So Having an understanding of how your team engages with internal comms is really key to building a strategy that prioritizes what your employees are actually interested in, right? And that's going to start with benchmarks. But here's the thing, benchmarks aren't about chasing that perfect number, they're about creating a baseline for you and your team and then measure what's working and where there's room to grow. So metrics like open rates, click-through rates, and engagement stats, these aren't just numbers. They're actually a way to see how your team is interacting with your content and your messages and where you can improve. And while industry benchmarks can be helpful for context, we're going to go through all of those today. The most important thing you can do, and honestly, probably the biggest piece of advice we can give you, is to focus on what's meaningful for you and your team and your company goals. And here's why this matters. Setting your own benchmarks helps you measure progress and celebrate wins for you and your company, no matter how big or small. So if your open rate on your emails is 60%, but you're seeing the gold standard for your industry at 80%, that doesn't mean you're failing. Honestly, quite the contrary. It means there's a great opportunity to maybe fine tune your approach. Every improvement, every kind of new measure you take is a step in the right direction. So here's a snapshot of what we're going to be going through today. We'll be talking about what data we looked at when building this report. I'm going to talk here in a minute about just a couple quick definitions for key metrics that we'll be chatting about today. Our top 10 key takeaways. We'll go through open rates, subject lines, click through rates, benchmarks by company size and industry, and then also just a couple of miscellaneous best practices and ways for you to start creating your own benchmarks, things you can start doing today to start seeing improvement in your comms. All right, here's a snapshot of our top 10 key takeaways. So, if you're running internal comms, you probably already know that email is one of your best ways to reach your team, right? We're big fans of email here at Workshop. Email works across all generations and locations globally. It connects with employees on a personal level, it keeps them informed, and it really is the foundation of any great comm strategy. But you might be wondering, are my emails actually working? So we dug into data from 107 million emails, a lot of emails, to find out what's really driving opens, clicks, and engagement. So we're going to go through all of this in depth. So I don't want to spoil this too much, but here's an overview of just some of the key takeaways from our report that we'll chat about. At a glance here, I would love to know in the chat if anything jumps out to folks right away. The average open rate for internal emails is 76%, while the click through rate is 10%. I know Devin's going to get into this a little bit later, but emails sent from a leader or well-known individual definitely get more opens. Really excited to dive into these takeaways here. And I'm glanced down at the chat and I just see a ton of LinkedIn going through, everybody connecting. I am loving this. Awesome. Okay, we also want to give you an idea of what data is actually included in this report that we've built. As I mentioned earlier, our findings are based on 107 million emails. These were sent from December 2023 to December 2024 from the Workshop platform. We've also based this on a wide variety of company sizes, anywhere from 1 to 500 employees, all the way up to companies with 10,000 plus employees. There's also so many industries that are represented in this report. We'll go through a few of these individually here in a little bit. I know Devin's going to walk through some of those, but some of them including healthcare, consumer goods, technology, travel and hospitality, and more. And then also we wanted to include just a snapshot of some of the companies that are represented in this report. So Papa John's, Gorilla Glue, Monster Energy Drink, and so many other really cool, great companies. Okay, before I pass this over to Devin to peel back some of these layers, I do want to touch on a few definitions that we'll be touching on today. So you can screenshot this slide or have your report pulled up in another tab on your computer if you want to refer back to it on any of these definitions. The first one is number of recipients. So this is going to be the number of people on the send list for any given email, right? So if you send it to your marketing team, there's 15 people on that list, that's the number of recipients. Your open rate is the percentage of unique recipients that opened an email. This doesn't include multiple opens. Your click rate is going to be the percentage of recipients who clicked a call to action, a CTA, out of those who received your email. The click through rate, it's a little bit different. It's the percentage of recipients who clicked a CTA, again, a call to action, out of those who opened your email. And then lastly, the read time. So this is going to be how long your user spent interacting with the content of your email. So if they read the email, they're going to spend about more than 8 seconds in the email. If they skimmed it, it's going to be 3 to 8 seconds in that email. And then if they glanced it, they've opened it, but they spent less than 3 seconds in that email reading the content. So those are just some definitions for some key metrics. And with that, let's dive into the report. Devin, I am going to pass this over to you. I'll stop sharing here and let's get into it.
All right. Thank you, Kelsey. I think that was a pretty smooth handoff there. We're getting pretty good at this.
I know, Devin, me and you, a couple webinars later, we're like, this is a smooth.
We're using Zoom and we're doing all the things. Like Kelsey said, we're going to start peeling back some of the layers of this data. It was really great for me to see what was going on in the chat. So that way I can really get specific to what you all are looking for. When it comes to what's a good open rate, click through rate, and read time, remember this is coming from over 100 million emails that were all sent using Workshop. Across industries, we saw about a 76% open rate and an average click through rate of 10%. Remember, this is the percentage of opened emails that clicked a link within the content. So this metric is calculated by taking the number of unique clicks and then dividing that by the number of unique opens. That's just kind of level setting us again. So when it comes to the read time, a lot of folks are doing just that. They're reading. 82.48% of employees are reading emails, while just shy of 7% are skimming. And then you have right in the middle there, 10.65%, excuse me, are glancing at those emails. So it means that when you have a really great open rate, folks are reading and consuming the content. So I saw some of this happening already in the chat. If you are looking for a better open rate, go ahead and give that 9 a.m. on Wednesday a try. Now, that's going to be relative to your time zone, of course. And if you're looking to improve your click-through rates, you can consider Mondays. This is a great time to send out those action items or top priorities for your employees to tackle through the work week. We also found that the average emails sent like after hours. So again, that's relative to your time zone, but anything like after 5 p.m. or your traditional work week, your work day, we're actually seeing a 17% drop in the open rate. But I'm sure that's no surprise to anyone. After you get off work, you probably want to turn your brain off, maybe do a little bit of scrolling somewhere else. Okay, so this is time for the chat to get active again. We've already been doing a really great job of this, but I'd love to know, have you done any experimenting with different send times? Like what's worked for you? I saw somebody in the chat say that I think Tuesdays and Thursdays are really great for folks in tech. What's not worked? Have you found a time that's just, ooh, we're not sending on 2 o'clock at Friday again? Would love to see those responses come through.
Seems like a lot of Mondays in the chat. Mondays for the win. Fridays too. A lot of Fridays coming through. Thursday at 10 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah. I try to avoid Fridays here at Workshop too.
Yep. A lot of people are saying avoiding Friday. Yep.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. Awesome. Let's keep pressing forward and talk a little bit more about those open rates. So we have that send time calibrated. And now let's talk about what you're getting into when you start to open up those emails. So if you think the average open rate of 76% feels high, that is because it is absolutely high. But before you get stressed about it and leap straight towards rewriting all your subject lines, know that the technology that you're using for your internal emails, it matters. It matters deeply to your open and click-through rates. So at Workshop, we set up every single internal comms team for success from the very beginning. And that, what we see is that often helps those open rates skyrocket just based on the right setup alone. So if you're wondering, okay, what is that setup? One of the first things that you can look at is actually removing that external sender banner from your internal emails. So this means configuring your send so that the emails never land in your employee spam folders, which is a huge problem if you're using an external tool like MailChimp, for example. Ghostwriting, Kelsey talked about earlier, it kind of matters who is that email coming from. Ghostwriting is a really great feature that allows you to send emails from other leaders within the company with the right permissions. And within Workshop, you can set use certain users to have certain permissions to be able to access this feature. So not everyone needs access to Ghostwrite on behalf of the CEO, but perhaps probably some folks on your comms team do. The next little piece here is scheduling and time zone sending. I've hinted at this a couple of times, and this is going to make sure that you are sending emails and making sure that it lands in inboxes at the right time. If you have a distributed workforce that's across time zones, you'll want to make sure that 9 a.m. email that you're sending actually doesn't end up in their inbox at 7 a.m. or even earlier, depending where they are in the world. You can also automatically optimize your emails for mobile and desktop viewing. This is something that you want to make sure that you're doing across the board. It really makes a big difference when you can actually see and consume the content on your mobile device. And this is all possible right within our platform. And so we highly encourage you to get in touch with us if you're running to any of these issues, if you're having issues with time zone sending, if you notice that your emails are not appropriately formatted for mobile, these are things that Workshop can help with specifically. So next up, it's how to improve these open rates. And realistically, there's only so many things you can do to improve your open rate for any individual email, but there's still maybe more than you think. And so here's a couple of factors that you might want to consider. First, who is the email being sent from? Sending from leaders or individuals often performs better than like those catch-all email addresses. So that's like the hello or comms or info, and doing that for company specific emails. The next thing is if you are sending out those emails, wanting to make sure that you're attaching a name to it. So I would love to hear in the chat if you're sending emails on behalf of leaders, like what's your process? If you don't have a ghostwriting feature, are you workshopping this in Google Docs? Are you sending it via email, the email before the email? I would love to see in the chat, how do you ghostwrite or collaborate when it comes to messages?
And then Hannah says, we send from internal communications. That's going to be the from name.
Mhm.
Keely says, email before the email. So much back and forth. Yes, we've heard that a bunch.
Yep, the company communications, internal email. There we go.
Yeah. A lot of shared docs. We hear that a lot, definitely working in a shared doc for that collaboration.
Yeah, that email before the email piece is funny. It's like, how many emails do you have to send before you actually send the email?
Mhm.
Uh, Awesome.
Awesome. This is all great.
Yeah, this is really great insight to have. So, the next thing that you might want to think about is the list that you're sending to. Does the email that you're getting ready to send out need to be sent to the entire company? Segmentation of your audience just a bit and tailoring the content for each is going to have a huge impact on open rates, right? Like people want to receive information that is pertinent to their work and being able to do their work more effectively. So, we also encourage you to think about the time zone sending in addition to that segmentation of content. So this is all available in Workshop, and using that whenever possible. It's just another way to be really aware of when your email is hitting inboxes. We've been talking a lot about like employee experience and engagement, and your employees are going to have a better experience when you're being cognizant of when you're communicating with them. The subject line, we have a couple of tips that we'll talk about how to improve the open rate based on the subject line a little bit later. So I won't focus on that too much. But again, it's just another great opportunity to really think about how can you make something easy to access, it's actionable, it's very clear what's going to be inside. And the preview text is very similar to that. This is a great place to have fun, and you can just add an extra layer of education, context, or entertainment here. So I know we're going through a lot, but I just want to remind you all again that the goal here isn't to get an 100% open rate. Why? Because you'll never reach 100% of your employees through one channel alone. Kelsey said it earlier, we love email here, and it's an incredible foundation. But to have the best take, It is to have a multi-channel strategy, a multi-channel approach to meet your employees where they are and reiterate important information to them. So, when it comes to email frequency, if we're looking at this month over month, we found that most companies are sending just about 14 emails. I'd love to also see in the chat. Does anyone know how many emails you're sending out on a monthly basis?
Yeah, I'm very curious. Devin, do you think 14? Does that seem like high or low to you?
When we were running through this the other day, I felt like that seemed really low. Now, if you look at if
Yeah.
it's just coming from me, that seems high. But if we like think about internal communications, like as a whole company, that's very low.
Yeah. Caitlin said, oh, I lost her in the chat. The chat's flying off. But Caitlin, I saw, she said 20 at her last role and 50 plus in her current role, but she really targets and segments. We'll go through that a lot, but that's so important to getting that content out that's super relevant to individual employees. I know we'll talk a little bit about that, but yeah, love to see that, Caitlin.
Yep. And this is also going to be really specific to your company size, right? Like, I can't imagine if you have less than 100 employees that you're sending a ton of emails out. Maybe you are. I don't know. But I think as the company grows, maybe the cadence of email sends does too.
Yeah. A lot of variety here in the chat of what folks are doing. I'm
Yeah.
seeing anywhere from 1 a week to 20 plus. Yeah,
Mhm.
very cool to see.
Yeah. I see Claudia saying that she sees herself CC'd on so many emails that are not related to her work. And that can certainly contribute to overwhelm in your inbox. Oh my gosh.
And lower engagement, lower open rate, and lower click-through rate. If it's not important to those folks on your
Mhm.
team, they're not gonna care about it.
Yep. Yeah, Cassandra, great question there. That 14 emails a month, that is for the company. And again, these are within Workshop. So we're able to track how many emails a specific company is sending through Workshop per month. Great question for clarity there.
Yeah.
So let's get back into the content itself a bit. So without getting too specific to industry, we don't really see a peak or pit in send days, right? If you look at the graph on the right-hand side here, you'll see this week, and you can see that it's pretty even. We see a little bit of a bump at Monday, maybe a little bit of a bump at the end of the week there. But we've talked earlier in the chat too about those days and times resonating. If this kind of feels right for you, I'd love to hear in the chat what days and times are working well for your company. We heard a lot early about just trying to avoid those Fridays, but there are some industries where it makes sense to send out an email on Friday or even to send out correspondence over the weekend. So let's dive a little bit more specifically here into subject lines. This is honestly one of my favorite things to do. I also often ask like communications professionals what's their order of operations when it comes to their subject lines. Do you do it before you write the content? Do you do it after? And subject lines are really just your attention grabber. So we want to dive into some industry specific insights here. So, first and foremost, the big question: how long should my subject line be? There is a sweet spot, and it's right between 21 and 40 characters. When those subject lines start to get to be about 80 characters, that's when we really start to see those open rates drop. Now, if you can imagine 80 characters, that is a long subject line. That sounds almost like a sentence or two. So, really thinking about how you can be brief, how you can make it clear what you're talking about. So, this graph represented on this page just shows you what that open rate percentage is based on the subject length. So, again, we see that 0 to 20 characters just right at 72%. And then we see the 21 to 40 characters at 76.13%. So let's share in the chat. So before we dive into what we've seen specifically work well for workshop customers, I would love to know if you have a subject line that has worked really well for you. And it doesn't have to be like a specific one, but maybe you have a cadence where you're doing something on a recurring basis that's performed really well for your company.
Mm. Matt in here says, I shoot for 6 words and 1 emoji.
Ooh.
Emojis, when used sparingly, love them.
Love an
Love
emoji.
them. Yes. Karen says anything with pay in the title. That'll get good open rates, I
Yeah.
feel like.
Yep. I'll open that email too.
Yep.
Ooh, alerts.
Axel says benefits or perks. Love, yeah, a lot of action words. I love that.
Free puppies. Yep, I'm opening that one too.
Jonathan says mark as important, urgent.
Mhm.
I'm curious to know though if you like use that too often, if people stop responding to the urgent notice.
Mhm. Yep, I like that,
Or
Larissa. Those action words, watch, read. That's great.
yep, yep. These are great.
Yep, yep. Also love kind of seeing the variants. Are you using all caps? Are you using sentence case? I think even as we get down into the nitty gritty details, it all makes a difference and is so specific to what works for your company.
Yeah. Alex here said, what's your take on emojis in subject lines? I definitely think when used sparingly, they can add a lot of like personality and fun. So yeah, big fan of them over here.
Yeah, I would agree.
When
And
used
like
sparingly.
sparingly and like in the right context, right? If you have a email subject line that it's related to puppies, like having an emoji of a puppy would make sense. If it's about pay, maybe let's not put the puppy emoji.
Good call out.
Making it make sense there. So if you are struggling with writing subject lines, or maybe even just want to improve what you're already doing, subject lines are a really easy adjustment for internal communicators. So here's a few tips. The first thing that you can do is highlight your employees. Subject lines like meet our newest team members, or shout out to insert employee name, or a warm welcome to blank. Celebrate and recognize your team members. Who doesn't love to see their name flash across your email screen? The next thing is keeping everyone in the loop. This is an opportunity to be both direct and transparent with those subject lines. We saw a lot of that in the chat where folks were saying important update, then putting the topic, what's changing with our team structure, CEO transition or CEO update, really just making it very clear what is going to be inside of the email. We also saw this in the chat too, making it clear when action is needed. I know I love having in my inbox action required. It gives me like a trigger to make sure I open the email. And then if I need to go back and do something, I'll mark it as unread again. So if your employees need to do something, spell it out. Action, subject lines, excuse me, like action required, submit by, including the deadline in the subject line. Oh my gosh. Reminder, your benefits, enrollment, those sort of things, time to review, new policy updates, so on and so forth. Those are going to be great for really helping with a little bit of management too. The next is creating a positive and inclusive tone. So, this could be the place where you start to sprinkle in some of those emojis. You can celebrate together with subject lines like, we appreciate blank, or we accomplished this, our commitment to a specific company value, or reflecting on a great year together, right? Every email doesn't have to be so serious. You can use internal emails to celebrate internal accomplishments and things that are happening for the culture. The next is keeping things timely. So if it's tied to a specific time frame, include it. So if this is an event, say that it's happening next week and then put the name of the event or put the date, right? Like March 2024. Oh my gosh, 2024, 2025. We are in the future. Or just put what specific week is going on. That's also going to help folks sort of project manage and make sure that they're prioritizing the information in your emails. You can also use these subject lines to drive excitement for events specifically. You can get your employees interested in what's coming up with those subject lines that are like, join us at, insert the event name, national summit, whatever the case may be. You can really get specific with those event titles. Another thing that you can do is add personality. So, when appropriate, a little bit of fun can go a long way. This is something that we actually like to do at workshop with our all hands emails, where the subject line will often be what something that someone funny said in the meeting, which is really great. So you could think about just another blank Monday, or guess what, we've got big news, like thinking about the ways that you can be playful with those subject lines and add personality, because who wants to always get these very serious emails? And last but not least, but focusing on what your employees care about. If it's about pay, we saw that earlier in the chat. If it's about benefits or perks, you want to make that clear, right? That email subject line that has pay in it, somebody's going to open that up. You could also have something that says like your payroll schedule, here's what to know, new perks, you got it, so on and so forth. Now, I know I dropped a lot of suggestions down there when I saw the chat rolling through, but it's just, there's so many options and possibilities for this.
Mm.
Yep. I love the idea of jazzing up. Yep, I like that, Diane, too. Awesome. So, if you're feeling a little stumped on subject lines, allow me to introduce you to AI. Now, I'm saying that with a little bit of a joke, but within Workshop, AI can actually suggest subject lines and preview text. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But all of the suggestions are going to come from the content of your email. So it's not like something random from somewhere random. This is actually like contextual suggestions, and the cherry on top is you don't need to be a prompt engineer. So, what on the right hand side of the screen here is what that looks like when you're using Workshop, where you could have no subject line entered, or you could have something already written out. Maybe you have an idea of where you want to go. And then a simple drop down allows you to simplify it. You can emojify it. You can even change the tone to make it more approachable, professional, action oriented, or other. So this is another great way to use AI in a way that's not so overwhelming if it's something that's a little bit new to you.
Yeah. Yeah, Devin, Jamie in the chat said this feature, it's not just pulling from like Chat GPT. It's based on real data and your content. So it's a really cool feature.
I use it a lot. And it's also just fun to see like what it comes up with. It also makes me think, am I making sure that the content of my email is very clear and very actionable? Because that's going to give you an even better subject line suggestion.
Mhm.
All right, let's talk a little bit about click through rates and a few things you can do to improve them. So, what's the ideal length of your email? The only way to find this out is to test. We were able to draw that our data is excessively long emails didn't see as many clicks as you got towards the bottom. Again, this is probably not going to be a huge surpriser for folks. So, what we would suggest is that employees tuned out or clicked off before reaching the end of the content, if they even read the top part, right? I know, especially with those like term and condition emails, I'm like, scroll, 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 get me to what I need to know. But for most organizations, a beautiful internal newsletter template that includes employee photos, branded elements, gifts, surveys is key to engaging your team. So, for organizations with a lot of frontline or deskless employees, so maybe those folks who actually don't have a work specific email, a simple text based or even a mobile friendly design paired with something like 5 things to know, right? Keeping it very quick and actionable for them also works really well when it comes to the length of your email.
Devin, we have a question here
Yeah.
on the length of an email. Chris said, any sense of word count that was considered too long? Not to my understanding. I think this just goes back to really testing it for your employees and your teams. Devin mentioned if it's like a in-office employee, maybe just a really beautiful built out newsletter. But if you do have those front lines, keeping them really short. Anything else on that, Devin, about word count specifically?
Yeah, I think breaking up the copies is also going to be great. So that's where those GIFs, those photos, even just line breaks, you can just insert a visual break will really help. I'm a big fan of bullet points. So in the case where I find myself writing big chunks of paragraph text, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here in the slides. But yeah, you can bullet point things and then even link out. So if you put like the top information and then have a link that's embedded, that's a really great way to break up that and consider the word count if you feel that it's a little too lengthy. And my rule of thumb, and Jamie says this for us often, if it feels like it's too much, if you wouldn't want to read it, or if you read it out loud and it sounds wonky, it probably is.
Mhm.
Ooh, yep, I like that, Dave. We end our email with one last thing. That's really cool. Yep, bullet points are great. GIFs when they make sense, very similar to those emojis as well.
Mhm.
So, when it comes to improving your click through rates, here's a few of our favorite ways. We've talked about this a bit, but write like a human, not a corporate memo. So you can keep your copy casual. A good rule of thumb here is to actually read those subject lines out loud. This is something that I'll do at my desk, and it probably looks like I'm talking to myself a bit. But if you wouldn't say it out loud to your coworker, chances are you probably shouldn't write it, right? Like you should think of something that's a little bit more human, a little bit more engaging. Also, thinking about keeping it short and skimmable. Bullet points, like we just talked about, bold text. We do that a lot here at Workshop. And emojis, when used sparingly, can really help call out important information and break up large chunks of content. And lastly, is make it visual. We're big fans of visual emails. People process visuals 60,000 times faster than text. I learned that and I was like, whoa. So pop in a GIF or an employee photo in your emails to make things more visual. And we're really leaning on the like employee photos here because we want your teams to feel represented in the emails that they're sending versus like stock photos, right? Stock photos are great too.
Abby in the chat said, good idea to read it out loud, keeps it human. I love that point. I know that was a big piece of advice Jamie gave me. Read it out loud. Does it sound like yourself? And sometimes you'll type out something and be like, that sounds great. And then you read it out loud and say, I would never say that.
Like, why am I trying to sound so formal?
Yes.
Awesome. So, just a couple of more things to improve those click through rates for you. It's to get personal and segment when you can. One of the reasons you may not be getting that click through rate that you really want is because you're sending content to the entire team versus maybe the folks who just need to know that information. So, when the content feels relevant, you'll see your engagement skyrocket. So, how are you all personalizing any internal emails that you're doing now? Whether it's specific to departments or maybe the geographic location of a team. Are there any success stories that we can share about segmentation?
Oh, yes. I'd love to hear some of these.
I feel like this is really where the friendships are built.
Yes. Patty
Yeah.
says department segmentation is big. Yes.
Mhm. Yep, location segmentation. That makes sense, Alex. Yep. Yeah. Lots of
Yep.
location specific ones. That, again, that makes sense when you have a distributed workforce. Ooh, leader specific. Those leader specific newsletters, Claudia, are those going just to your leadership team? Or are they coming from your leadership? I'd love to know that.
Good call out.
Mhm.
I like the full-time versus part-time. That's a great one. Yay. I also love seeing folks saying they're excited to try out segmentation.
Mhm. Ooh, hybrid versus remote. That's a good one.
Yes. That is a really good one. If you're sending out like an event calendar for your HQ, but your remote employees don't need to know about it, they're going to glaze over that information. That's a great way. That's a great one.
Mhm. I feel like you all are in my notes. So I was going to talk about segmentation next, but I'm going to glaze over that because you all are doing a great job, it sounds like, with segmenting your emails by department, role, or even location. Another thing that you could do is you could have like headquarters events calendar. This is something when I joined Workshop that I started. So we use Google and we have now an internal communications calendar along with an events calendar that folks can like toggle on and see everything that's happening. So maybe you are remote and you don't necessarily need to get the department specific information. That's for like our folks in Omaha, but maybe you just are curious and you want to know. So now you have the option to see it. Another thing that you can do is make it easy and fun to click. So we talked about those call to actions, and this should be something that's clear, compelling, and simple. So you could highlight any benefits in your CTA and then limit the choices. Having 17 buttons in your email might be a little bit overwhelming. So think about how you can streamline that, getting it to one really strong CTA that will perform better than 5 weak ones. I was being really dramatic when I said 17. I've never seen an email with 17 buttons. Another thing that you can do is gamify your newsletter. We love hiding Easter eggs in our emails. So this could be something as easy as the first 5 people to click this and RSVP will get a coffee card, or maybe it's a company branded t-shirt, right? Like it can be a whole host of things, but it's a way to encourage folks to not only open up those emails, but engage with the content and ultimately click on something. We have already talked a little bit about segmentation and how we're doing that again based on location, departments. But are there any other ways that you would personalize or segment your audiences? Hearing this information, maybe it could be something that you're not even doing right now, but you'd love to try. Go ahead and drop that in the chat. Oh, that's a cool one, Shannon. We used to have a buzzword of the week, which would encourage people to click and find the word with random prize winners. Very cool.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
I know we've had a customer in the past kind of hide their logo somewhere in like one of the photos, like further down their email. And then how they gamify it was like the first five people to find the logo. Where's Waldo?
It is fun, and it just really shows that you can have meaningful content, but still engage your employees in, like, a meaningful, fun way. I think it's such a sweet balance of things. So, if you're looking to level up your employee communications and even get a little bit of internal inspiration, we have a full gallery of emails that we know work both visually and strategically. So, on Workshop, you're actually able to browse through more than 30 customizable employee communication template designs and get a few ideas of how you could even spin some up on your own. One of the things that I love about the template gallery is it can almost like trigger like, oh, I didn't think to send out an email for this. And you can use that as a way to almost even build out your internal comms calendar. So, whether you're crafting your next employee newsletter, onboarding sequence, or even benefits email, this gallery should be a go to resource for both sparking ideas and then turning them into engaging, high performing messages. I know that link to our template gallery will get dropped in the chat. Even if you're not a current customer, you're going to be able to scroll through there and see what we have. Also, if you're using any workshop templates, I would love to see who's using it. It's always so fun to see like how a template can start and how a company can make it their own by dragging in things, changing colors, swapping photos. Really cool. All right. This is the time. Get your stretch, get that sip of coffee, because we are going to dive into truly like the meat and potatoes of this conversation. Very early on, I saw some folks asking about what about this specific industry? How does this compare for me? And so this is the section to, as our sales folks say, lock in. This is going to really be the one where you're going to want to take notes. You can screenshot. Of course, this is going to be, you already have access to the report, and we're going to be sending it out in the recap email as well. So let's go ahead and dive in. So, first, we're going to look at the overview of email engagement. So, this is going to be across industries. We haven't got super specific yet. But basically, peak email send days and send times means that we are seeing this behavior specifically in workshop customers. So this isn't like an industry-wide sweep. This is just for the over 100 million emails that have been sent out in workshop. So this is what we consider to be the best times, but it's not necessarily a universal truth. So when we look at peak email send times and days, this is based on the company's default time zone within workshop. So you've heard me say that, like relative time zone, that sort of thing. So this is again going to be the company's default versus workshops. And we're going to dive a little bit more into these industries in depth, but the ones that are represented in this report. So if you hear this and you're in this industry, know that we've got something for you. So the first is education. We have healthcare, technology, consumer goods, energy, government, finance, nonprofit, professional services, media and entertainment, restaurants, and travel and hospitality. So that is what we're going to be covering in our time together. And all of these graphics are already in the report. And they're a great reference point if you want to compare how you're doing against others in your industry. So, this is a look at the average across all industries and sizes, and we'll break this down into more specific industries so you can compare where you are. So, this is really just a recap of what Kelsey kind of talked about at the top of this webinar, where you see that average open rate, that average click rate, and that average click through rate. On the right hand side, we also see those peak email send days and those send times. All right. So, consumer goods, folks, this is where we're going to start getting in specifically to you. So, if you are in the consumer goods industry, feel free to add context in the chat, add what you're finding if your open rate is pairing up and matching with this. Any of that, we love to see it. I'm going to do my very best to keep my eyes on the chat, but ultimately, we're just going to walk through these together. So, when it comes specifically to consumer goods, we're seeing a really great average open rate, right? That 83.95% and that average click rate of 8.33%. Very similar to the overall industry trends, we're seeing that the top of the week is a great time to deploy out those emails, where a lot of folks are sending Monday, Tuesday, again, probably sending out those memos so that employees can be aware of what's happening. They can start to create action items and to do lists for the remainder of the work week. What's really interesting here is to see, of course, that peak send time being around that like 9 o'clock in the morning, again, relative to where that company is, but certainly like that dip as we get into midday, right? That 11 to 1, we see a pretty significant dip. But there is a little bit of a jump up there at the 2 o'clock time. So if that's of interest to you, if that's resonating, would love to hear that well, see that in the chat. All right. Education. If that's you, maybe drop a little book emoji in the chat. Our education clients often send to think about students, part time faculty, other staff that's on campus, or even if you're not like at a university setting. And so what we're seeing is they get the most engagement before the workday traditionally starts, right? So when we were looking at consumer goods, we saw a high engagement time for the sends being around that 9 o'clock. But this is really interesting to see those early mornings. We've got some early bird sends. So that can mean a couple of things. Like you're sending out before classes, you're making that sure that folks are getting that pertinent information really before they start to dive into the workday. When we look at the average open rate, it's going to be pretty high as well, too. That average open rate is 80.15%, which is great. And we look at the click-through rate specifically, it's just a little bit over 9%. Oh, yep, I see some of those books. I see Eugene, Alyssa, Liz, very cool. Feel free to drop anything in the chat that's resonating with you here.
These are all so great, Devin. I can't believe we only have 10 minutes left.
I know. Time is flying.
Time
So,
is fine.
finance. So one of the things that we took into consideration is when the New York Stock Exchange opens, right? So that's 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday. So that sort of makes sense when you look at those email send times, right? 10 a.m. is really jumping. So it can inform that maybe there's some information that is being deployed to that group after the stock market opens. And then, of course, we see that really start to dip down as we get into after hours. Government, again, when we're looking at the context of what the workday is, so like that 8 a.m. to 5, we see a lot of companies in the government sector working those specific hours and likely engaging with emails at the top of their day. So again, we see that chart start to taper down a bit as we get after 10 a.m., a little bit of a peak there at 2, but ultimately this is what we're seeing across government. The open rate is just shy of 79% at 78.52%. We are seeing a little bit of a lower click rate, but that's nothing to be too worried about because, again, maybe the information here is being deployed in bullet points or it's really actionable for folks and there's nothing that they need to click out further to. Healthcare. What I found interesting about this one that is healthcare is one of the top 3 industries represented for workshop customers. And the engagement here always seems to surprise people. It's pretty close to the average benchmark, if you recall, that 76%. So healthcare employees and comms teams are right on par with what we're seeing as far as the industry average goes. We're not really seeing a huge like difference in like the peak send day. Even Monday and Friday are pretty neck and neck when it comes to those sends. So again, probably thinking about what information are they deploying out to teams that's actionable for them. Media and entertainment. This is also pretty average across the board, but we are still seeing those higher engagement times in the morning. As far as days go, it looked like, again, pretty standard across the board, with just like a slight dip when it comes to engagement on Tuesdays. If anyone is in entertainment, I would love to hear why you maybe think that's happening. The really interesting thing about all this data is if you don't have the contextual or qualitative information to supplement it, it's really just a lot of, I wonder what that could be. When it comes to media and entertainment, we're seeing just above the industry average. It's at that 78.73%. Nonprofits, just like our friends who work in government, a lot of those nonprofits are going to follow that typical 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. work schedule. So we're seeing that they're also engaging with emails at the start of their day. Did you know that nonprofits actually get a discount at Workshop? That's really cool to know. When it comes to their average open rate, it's just a little bit higher than the industry average. It's just right at that 81.25%. And that's a pretty strong click through rate down there at just 12.5%, which is really cool to see. When we look at that send time again, we're seeing a little bit in the early morning, but a good majority of those emails going out right at 8 a.m. Professional services. So these are folks who are typically working in an office settings. This is a broad sweep, but you can imagine that they're reading emails at the beginning of their day. Monday also seems the best day to send if you're in comms specifically in this industry. All right, restaurant and food services. And my coffee's empty. I'm getting a little hungry here. Lots of restaurant industry. It just is going to vary based on the type of restaurant or food it is, right? Maybe if it's a brunch place, you're going to be doing things a little bit earlier, or maybe if you're switching over to a night shift for like dinner. But ultimately, what we're seeing is food services are most engaged right before those rushes. So think like your 10 a.m. before the lunch rush and then 3 p.m. before dinner. Technology, surprisingly, is below average. And that could be that most folks in the technology industry are getting their comms from other channels like Slack, right? That doesn't mean that emails don't do well, but maybe they're getting cross posts somewhere else. So going back, you're never going to reach 100% of your audience in just one channel. So this is only for email. This doesn't consider any other sort of internal comms channels. Travel and hospitality. This is going to be one of those that also is likely heavy on those frontline workers, navigating multiple time zones, comm related opens and closures, things like that. Maybe certain hotel rooms need some changing. So when it comes to the travel industry, we're seeing that it's a little bit lower than the average on the email front, but we also see a lot of our other channels like SMS and QR codes being adopted here. Within Workshop, it's really cool. You can actually send an email and then link the email using a QR code, which is great for shared screens and places like that. Woo! So I know we're flying through this, but a few more interesting benchmarks and best practices for your internal emails that we found when you're creating this report is emails sent to less than 1,000 people tend to perform better than those emails that send to more than 1,000 people. So again, consider targeting, segmentation, and then contact us if you're having any sort of issues with distribution list. The next is 77% of emails include a link. About a fourth of emails don't include one at all. And you may not need one depending on the context of the information, right? Like those bullet points separating out text could be what you need. About half of Workshop customers have used our platform to cross-post an email to another communications channel. So that's SharePoint, Teams, Slack. We use Slack here at Workshop, and it's actually really easy. It's literally just a click within our email editor. We're also seeing that the most common email campaigns are newsletters, announcements, training emails, and leadership updates, right? Those are going to be the types of emails that are sending out most frequently. And I said this a little bit earlier, but event emails tend to typically have a little bit of a higher, not only open rate, but also click through rate. So now we want to just reiterate that those industry benchmarks that we just went through are great to give you context, but benchmarks aren't about chasing the perfect number. They're about creating a baseline to measure what's working and where there's opportunity to grow. So we're just going to dive into a couple ways that you can create your own benchmarks and best practices. So we've said this probably 18 times now, but just forget chasing the perfect number. Your benchmark should work for you and your organization. It's so easy to get caught up in those industry-wide stats and even be like, oh my gosh, the average is 76%. Like we're not at that. That's okay. The real magic happens when you track what matters to your team. So that could be open rates, that could be the click-through rate, engagement metrics. They're just not numbers. They tell you what's working and what's not and where you can improve. So instead of comparing yourself like in a negative way to another company with a completely different workforce, start your own baseline. If your open rate right now is 60% and it's growing, that's a win. If your employees are clicking and engaging more than last quarter, you're on the right track. The best internal communicators are using platforms like Workshop that really make this process of tracking how you're faring over time easy. There's built-in analytics. You can see who's reading your emails, what they're clicking on, like specifically, as you can see here on the right, we can see that Jamie opened this email. Sandy opened this or clicked this email, right? You can even segment this data out by department role, and location to understand what works better for specific teams. So we talked about segmentation earlier, but now you can get even more granular in that to know that, okay, we're sending this to the Dallas office, but it's really not landing. So, if you're experimenting, Workshop can help you add more engaging content, track trends over time, and then adjust based on real data. Because the goal isn't just better numbers, we want to be better at communication. So, one of the most loved parts about Workshop is our ability to segment data by department, role, and location. We've talked about this a couple of times, but just imagine being able to see what actually the sales team or the engineering team is less engaged with on a specific email, or that your CEO isn't reading your weekly updates, or that you've specifically improved communications in one specific part of the business. If you want to experiment with this, you can actually try it manually with your next send. So basically, what you can do is you can carve off one department, let's say marketing, send them a copy of the newsletter, and then send that same newsletter to everyone else. Then you can compare the average across the company. Of course, if you were using a tool like Workshop, you can tackle this will the tool will actually tackle this for you. So it's easy to have multiple sends and then you can compare the data right within one dashboard. Workshop campaigns. This is probably one of my favorite features about Workshop. It provides you with a simple bird's eye view of how an entire campaign is doing, all rolled up into reporting across all emails and touch points. So this allows you to see like the different subject lines, improve your call to actions, whether it decreases or increases, and you don't have to manually pull this into any spreadsheet. This is really helpful when you're sending recurring campaigns. Like for us, we send an all hands email every Tuesday. It's really easy to be able to visually and quickly see how that email is trending over time, whether it's month over month, quarter over quarter, or even longer. The most common ones we see are for monthly newsletters, CEO emails, and new hire onboarding. This is baked right into Workshop, but you can look at campaign data manually. Again, you can typically start at drawing conclusions about 3 to 5 cents, right? So if you're manually looking at this, send that newsletter 3 times and then take a step back and start to measure. And you can look at that right in Excel or Google Sheets, and then maybe start to see some patterns and interesting highs and lows when you're looking at that data. So, using benchmarks to answer questions, analyzing data isn't always the easiest task. Sometimes looking at that spreadsheet can be really overwhelming. And so, here's just a short list of questions that you can ask to get to the heart of information. So, I'm going to give you just a second to look at this list. Do you think there's anything that we're missing here? We're asking questions like, what was the most clicked link in the email? Are there any surprises with the data? Is this information relevant to a particular employee or department? Anything we're missing here that you would add to this list? Awesome. I see that.
I love the Yeah. I love the what have I learned here that I can apply to my next send and always just swapping out new things, trying new things.
I love that. I love that. Okay. So I know we're talking a little bit about feedback and data. I would just remind you all to never underestimate the qualitative feedback. It's really capturing that sentiment from your employees, knowing what's working, not working. If there's a particular piece of qualitative feedback that you are feeling really validated by, take a screenshot of it, put it in something that we like to call a smile file. This is great for sharing with leadership and just pulling up when you're having one of those days. Whew. I know we're like right at the end here, at the end. But if ultimately, if you're in need of any sort of help with your internal comms tool, Workshop is here to help. We were built with internal communications in mind. With Workshop, you can measure clicks, your open rates, and see which employees have and haven't read your emails. And you can most importantly meet your employees where they are with channels that they like to engage with. I'm going to pause here because I know we're right at time.
Yes. Honestly, this has been so wonderful. There is so much data in this report, and I know we're at time. We want to be respectful of y'all time. So if you do want to continue the conversation, Devin would be happy to chat with you. I would be happy to chat with you. Jamie, who I didn't even mention at the beginning, she was supposed to be on this webinar, but she's been sick, but I know she would love to chat with you. Honestly, anyone here at Workshops, thank you so much for joining us today. We'd love to continue the conversation. And yeah, connect with us on LinkedIn. And we're so excited for the next webinar. Hopefully, all of you will join us for our next one.
Yes. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you all. And we'll send out the recording and all the content here very shortly. So have a wonderful day. Thanks, everyone.